Hey guys, we are Really Justice System? Yikes.
Hi, I'm Riley.
Hi, I'm Jaya.
And hi, I'm Sam.
And I am Jarelis. And today's episode is called Capital Punishment in America. And we're back. This episode is about, yes, you've guessed it, death penalty. Full disclosure, we just want our viewers to understand the concept of death penalty, and since our theme is social injustice, we thought this was a great topic to talk about in our visual podcast. I hope everyone enjoys and learns about this topic. Now let's head on to the first question. What do you guys know about the death penalty?
Well, I think that the death penalty is a serious topic that nobody talks about. It may be also taboo in our society.
I think I may have seen some news stories talking about the subject, but I honestly don't know about the crimes or when they took place.
I mean, I've heard of it watching movies. It's basically when someone does a really serious crime, like murder, and then they'd get the lethal injection or the chair or something like that.
You guys are all right. Well, the general definition of death penalty is death as a punishment given by a court of law for a very serious crime. I want to show you guys a video that will pretty much summarize the concept.
A really quick and occasionally bloody look at the death penalty.
Got a minute? Well, I've only got 2 or 3, so let's get started.
History.
And boy, what a history!
Backbreaking, blood eagle boiling, buried alive, burning, cooking, crucifixion, crushing and disembowelment, chipping and impalement, self-slicing and suffocation. Any other horrible way that a person could die.
Brutal! But it's not all ancient history. We still have beheadings and stonings in Saudi Arabia, folks strung up from cranes in Iran, mass executions in China, and the occasional death by anti-aircraft gun in North Korea.
Geography.
140 countries around the world have ended it altogether, including all Western democracies. All Western democracies except the United States. Not only one of the top 5 executing nations in the world, the only Western democracy on the planet still knocking off its own people. Even here, the death penalty has been on the decline in recent years. 34 states either have no death penalty or haven't carried one out in over 5 years. But there are just 15 counties responsible for the majority of executions carried out since '76.
Cost.
But at least it's cheaper to execute someone than to lock them up for life. Am I right? Well, the average death penalty case in Texas costs taxpayers around $3 million. More than it costs to lock someone up at a highest security prison there for 120 years.
Wow, that was a lot of information. I can't believe that execution is so expensive.
That's correct. In the state of Texas, taxpayers pay over $3 million, which is more than just letting someone being in jail.
Okay, but how many countries have actually abolished the death penalty?
Well, basically 140 countries all over the world have ended death penalty, and there are still 16 states executing people. According to The Economist, in 2016, just 60% of Americans approve of death penalty for murder, which is a lot lower than the 1990s, which was 80%. But in 2015, only 8 states of the 16 have executed.
Well, I still wonder why America still has a death penalty.
If we truly think about it, just in case some of you guys didn't know, our Fifth Amendment says, no person shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property, without due process of law. In other words, if the law says that you are guilty of committing a serious crime, you may get capital punishment.
Okay, I understand that the death penalty is for people that have done serious crimes, but what would those be?
Actually, today in our episode, we will be discussing 2 cases that we think that are relevant to our topic. We will learn about these cases and how they affect us today. And with that, Jaya, will you start off with our first case?
For sure. Alright, okay, so what do we think? Does the justice system discriminate? I mean, from all the statistics, it's hard to ignore the fact that there isn't something wrong with the system.
I mean, yeah, of course there's something wrong. It's not like it's something new. It's been happening for years, since the beginning of time almost.
That's true. Have you guys ever heard of the case Emmett Till?
Well, kind of.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Okay, so from my understanding, it isn't exactly a case about the death penalty, but it's pretty similar to these types of cases that would be sentenced to the death penalty.
So what exactly happened in the story? Was another innocent black man killed?
But wait, when did this happen? Yesterday?
No, but you hear... No, it's like every day you hear another story.
Okay, I'll say comment like, wow.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, but it's like every day you hear another story similar. The funny part is that it happened in the 50s and it sounded like it could happen today.
Wow.
But it was one of the cases that started the civil rights movement because people were so heated about it.
Well, I didn't really know that. Like, how did it actually start the civil rights movement, though?
Okay, well, I'll tell you the whole story.
According to Apollyon Carriot and Christopher Metris in the book Emmett Till in Literary Memory and Imagination, Emmett was only 14 years old when he arrived to Mississippi. He was apparently staying with his cousin and his uncle down there. Now, Till was from Chicago, so Mississippi was very different compared to Chicago back then. Before Till left, he was taught to do all the right things when encountering a white person. Don't make eye contact and walk on the other side of the street. Till did have some white friends in the north, so he thought it wouldn't hurt to say something. So while him and his cousins were out at the grocery store on August 24th, 1955, he was dared to say something to Caroline Bryant. Till had said something that flustered the woman. We're not sure what he said, but we do know that he whistled in her direction. Long story short, a few days went by and men had showed up at the door around 2:30 a.m. on August 28, 1955. He was kidnapped, beaten, tortured, and shot in the face. They then dumped him in the river.
Whoa, that's crazy. What happened to the men who did it?
These men were taken in by the police for suspicion of kidnapping, and they admitted to taking Till, but they said they let him go when they discovered it was the wrong boy. And guess what? The jury was all white and all male. This case was also taken in Mississippi.
I think I have a feeling where this is going.
Yep. They did not go to jail, and they died of old age. And what is horrifying about this is the photo of Emmett Till. This photo is what brought the civil rights movement into action, and according to Apollyon Carriot and Metris, Till's brutal slaying is reconfigured as a Christ-like sacrifice. He is conceived as a savior and a redeemer.
Disclaimer. Photo may be too gruesome for some.
Wow, I mean, this is so awful. Do you think that if this was a death penalty case, that these men who murdered Till would get sentenced, or would Till never get his justice?
I don't know. Maybe if it was today, yes, but they had an all-white jury and it was in the South, so odds are slim. But something I do want to tie this back is to a recent case with Anthony Haynes, who was sentenced to the death penalty for murdering a cop.
You know, I find this interesting because cops murder innocent people every day, and you hear it on the news all the time. But I don't see any of them being sentenced to the penalty.
Well, get this. According to the NAACP, black people make up 13% of the population, but they make up 42% of death row and 35% of those executed. Many studies have found that the race of the victim to affect who receives the death penalty, with homicides of white victims more likely to result in the death penalty.
It just doesn't make sense. But I heard about this case though. This man was being pulled over and the cop was searching for something. And Hans was scared and knew from his past that he may get shot at the moment.
Yes, so he pulled out a gun and shot him before the cop could shoot him first. Here's a quick video to hear what Anthony thinks about his sentence.
Let's go.
Houston cop killer Anthony Haynes will be executed by lethal injection.
The officer was off duty, but pulled Haynes over, identified himself as a police officer, was reaching for his badge in his back pocket when he was shot by Haynes in the left eye.
He fought me for a while. He says, I'm a cop. But as he says, I'm a cop, he reaches for his hip. I can't see what he's reaching for, but just my personal life experience tells me he's going for a weapon. So I fired one shot.
Ready? Hey!
His attorney, Mr. Richard Ellis, he's actually taken Anthony's case personal. He believes that he should not be on death row.
I think it's easier to be in prison on death row as a younger person because you haven't experienced life. You don't have to, I wasn't married. I didn't have kids.
So what you're saying, that people of color have to be scared? Till's story is what makes people of color afraid of whites. Just like Till, they are still murdered today, making them fear the system that allows for police to freely do this. Therefore, they feel the need to protect themselves, and to him, his only option was to protect himself from being shot by the police. But that ultimately led to his death by the United States justice system.
Yes, and because of history, this affects many lives today. And what's interesting is that today's news, when you hear a white officer who shoots a black kid, they are not only sentenced to the death penalty, but they have no consequences at all.
Wow, that's a very powerful video. There was actually a poll in March of 2018 where the
Just make it up. Just make it up.
Quinnipiac.
Quinnipiac? I don't know. Just make it up.
Okay.
Quinnipiac.
Quinnipiac, yeah.
Quinnipiac?
Yeah.
Good. Wow, that's a very powerful video. There was actually a poll in March of 2018 where the Quinnipiac University in Connecticut asked 1,291 voters, which punishment do you prefer for people convicted of murder? The death penalty or life in prison with no chance of parole? Did you guys know that 51% of the Quinnipiac poll respondents said that they prefer life without parole versus 37% who prefer capital punishment?
That's insane. But what about the case of McCleskey versus Kemp? Have you guys heard about that one?
No, I can't say I have.
Well, let me tell you guys a little bit about it.
Good.
Let's go for it.
Do it.
In 1987, there was a Supreme Court case held against Warren McCleskey for armed robbery and the murder of a police officer in Georgia where the death penalty is legal. In this case, McCleskey went on to prove that more blacks receive the death penalty when the victim is white. What do you guys think about this?
I think that goes to prove how corrupt our justice system can be. Yikes.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes it's unfair because of the color of your skin. The odds are worse off for you.
Even when this case took place in the late 80s, it's still happening today, and we need to put a stop to it.
Okay, yeah, I agree, but how can we do that?
I think we can do that by providing better representation for minorities and people that cannot pay for their own lawyers.
Oh my God, that makes a lot of sense, but it seems like it could be a hard thing to accomplish.
True.
What's the main problem when it comes to representation?
Well, I did some digging, and according to the Death Penalty Information Center, the attorneys defending these individuals on death row are underpaid, overworked, and lacking experience in these types of cases.
Yeah, that's really sad that people's lives are at stake and they cannot even give them a fair trial because of their lawyers.
So what do you guys think they should do?
I think the state could help to provide for better lawyers or maybe prolong death sentence so these trials can be fair and innocent people will not be killed.
Actually, I did some digging, and based off the American Bar Association guidelines, attorneys have somewhat of an obligation to seek out a plea deal when it comes to capital cases. But obviously, defendants can choose not to take the plea deal, or court refuses to accept these deals. In any case, they're brought to court, and the death penalty could be implemented depending on the severity of the crime.
That's interesting. It's still really concerning how biased the system can be.
Yeah, and a shocking quote that I found, it says that even the innocent sometimes pleads guilty because the probability of conviction is great. fearing that if found guilty, they will face a heavier sentence than what they would have received if they had entered a plea. Okay, a little off topic, but you know what this kind of reminds me of?
Yeah, what's that?
So I got into this Netflix show, Black Mirror, recently, and in the newest season there's an episode called Black Museum.
No way. I love that one.
What's it about?
Yeah, go ahead.
The character is visiting a museum attraction when she runs into car troubles. Inside the museum, she meets a curator, and he starts telling her about all the objects inside and how he got them.
Whoa. Wait. Don't you think we should call spoiler alert first?
Yeah. Spoiler alert, guys. So he walks her through the museum, and when they get to the last part, it's revealed that inside the display is a hologram of a black man sitting in an electric chair. And every time someone pulls the lever, it replays a scene of the man being electrocuted. The twist here is that the technology used actually captures the man's consciousness, so that he is living inside the machine, in reality, reliving the moment every time someone comes to the museum to pull the lever.
So how does this relate to the podcast? Or are you just recommending everyone a show on Netflix?
Well, I think they should watch it, but I've seen this episode, and he has a good point. It's kind of an extreme look on how the justice system puts innocent people to death and the racial prejudice behind it all.
Exactly. This episode shows the exploitation of an innocent black man on death row who was tricked into giving up his consciousness to this man before he was executed. This white man, to be exact. The scene shows flashbacks to many instances where white people come to the museum just to pull the lever, just so he can re-experience his last moments before he died.
And the fact that it shows a knowingly innocent black man being coerced into pleading guilty, that's a powerful way of addressing the death row process and false guilty plea.
According to Samuel Walker's Sense and Nonsense About Crime and Drugs, 95% of defendants facing a capital punishment case actually plead guilty to take a deal of a lesser sentence to avoid a trial. Unfortunately, this man on the show was not given that opportunity.
So just like Emmett Till and McCleskey, how do I say that?
McCleskey.
And say like a very dramatic death.
So just like Emmett Till and McCleskey, and many others. McCleskey?
Yeah.
McCleskey, okay. So just like Emmett Till and McCleskey, and many others Americans that were sentenced to death. That was stupid.
What?
Okay,
what were you trying to say?
Just like
say death.
Many other Americans were sentenced to death. As our episode comes to a wrap, let's review the main points we hit today.
Riley brought up a great case that our justice system has had a history of underrepresentation of people of color, and that, in fact, more people of color have been put to death, even though it's an attorney's obligation to try and reach a plea deal with the prosecution.
Yeah, and it could have to do with the ability to afford a better lawyer, or even attorneys' willingness to properly defend people of color.
I really like the case that Jaya brought up about Emmett Till, showing the starting point of the pattern of people of color being taken advantage of when it comes to our justice system and their right to being innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah, that is right. His brutal murder was one of the starting points for the civil rights movement. And even though black people aren't necessarily being attacked to that extent, they are still being murdered by police, given poor legal representation, and being sentenced to death at a surprisingly higher rate than white people.
Well, thanks guys for this new look on reality of the death penalty. It opened my eyes to the injustice that's going on, and I'm sure it did for you too.
And a huge thanks to all the listeners for tuning into this episode of
Really, Justice System? Yikes!
Oof.
Oof.